Hello, everyone, and welcome to our international conference, Ethiopia, Modern Nation, Ancient Roots. The conference is a collaboration between the Africa Institute in Sharjah and the Institute of Ethiopian Studies and the School of Performing and Visual Arts at the University of Addis Ababa. The conference is part of an annual season of scholarly, cultural, and artistic activities in various media and genres, which we initiated last year to focus on one country from the African continent, or one of the African diaspora communities worldwide. The goal of this series is to highlight the complex history of the African world, its present and its future predicament. Through such series, the Africa Institute aims to bring to the fore the complex histories of the continent, its peoples, cultures, and civilizations on a global scale. For the academic year 2019-2020, the Africa Institute has focused on Ethiopia as the first in this series of seasons. To accomplish such an objective, the Africa Institute has commissioned 3 leading Ethiopian scholars, Elizabeth Georges from Addis Ababa University, Sirafel Wandemu from Addis Ababa University, and Dagmawi Wobshet from the University of Pennsylvania, to draft a detailed program for the season on Ethiopia. In addition to our conference today, the Ethiopia Focus program has included the following activities: a series of musical performances that were held in the autumn of 2019, and an art exhibition by the acclaimed Ethiopian artist Aida Mulune, organized in collaboration with the Sharjah Art Museum and the Sharjah Art Foundation. The exhibition is currently on view at the Sharjah Art Museum until the 31st of December. And for those of you who are not able to visit in person, you can view a virtual tour via our website, theafricainstitute.org. As many of you know, the conference was originally conceived as a 2-part event. The first was scheduled to take place in Sharjah in mid-March 2020 in the Africa Hall. And the second part was supposed to take place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in late May 2020 at the Institute of Ethiopian Studies in the University of Addis Ababa. However, both events were postponed due to COVID-19, and with no signs that the pandemic will leave us soon, we must find other ways to continue. Therefore, we have resorted to holding this conference as a series of webinars starting today, October the 17th, until the 25th of October. Although we are very disappointed not to welcome you all in person in Sharjah, we are happy to start the conference, which we hope to publish as a serious contribution to Ethiopian studies. Most importantly, having this event will be the beginning of many more collaborations to come, and of a strong relationship with all of you that will allow us all to host you in person in the years to come. Thank you so much for all of your time and for your contribution to what we expect to be a great gathering of brilliant minds.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome participants and audience from all around the globe. It's actually one of the ironies of the pandemic is that you get more audience than you get if you hold a conference in person. So I'm pleased to record that or to mention that we have over 100 for most of the panel. Each panel had a subscription or participants or audience for over 100. So that is a very pleasing, of course, prospect. So Hur's remark made it easy for me or made my task easier. Allow me to begin by thanking members of the team at the Africa Institute who worked very hard over the past year and a half to organize this conference, in addition to other parts of the Ethiopia focus season that Hur mentioned, which included opening lectures, music concerts, and a film series. I thank them for providing all the logistical support to make this conference a reality, despite the setbacks caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. I will just mention a few: Hajar Raha, Fatima Rashid, Sat'an, Sharif, Sarah, Selma Buhala, Rima Al-Badawi, Vijay, Abdul Aziz, among many others. I wish to single out my colleague Sat'an Al-Hassan for his hard work and diligent efforts, which made it possible for us to organize such a complex operation. I'm also extremely grateful to my colleagues in the convening committee, Professors Elizabeth Georges, University of Addis Ababa, Dagmar Wobshet from the University of Pennsylvania, and Surafel Wandimo from the University of Addis Ababa, whose knowledge of Ethiopian studies and beyond helped shape the intellectual premise and the conceptual tenets of this conference and its various themes. Words cannot express my gratitude for their efforts and for all of their collegiality, and of course, their friendship. I don't wish to take that much time from our opening session and the address by Professor Bahruz Zodi, to whom we're very grateful for being our opening keynote speaker. Allow me now just to delve directly and very briefly into the goals of this conference and its conceptual underpinnings. As stated in the booklet, Ethiopia, Modern Nation, Ancient Roots, actually the booklet I just want to mention to all of you, hopefully that you know that it is on the website and you can download it. So the conference calls for a range of interdisciplinary scholars to consider issues of Ethiopian modernity within a national international context. In many areas, including but not limited to, Ethiopia's image as a sovereign Black nation has influenced and has come to dominate debates on movements that range from Pan-Africanism to Afrocentrism in the 20th century and the 21st century. The conference aims to bring forth a transnational epistemological paradigms that can shed light on the current political, cultural, and intellectual complexities of Africa's oldest nation state. In the late 20th and early 21st century, Ethiopians have also experienced an unprecedented level of migration and have created new diasporas in Europe and North America that have shaped how Ethiopians at home and abroad have imagined themselves and forged new identification. This complex therefore aims to investigate the history of Ethiopia in and of itself and its complex relationship to the histories of the African continent, the wider African diaspora, and of course, the world at large. Let me stop here to allow my colleagues, Dagmawi, Elizabeth, and Surafel to elaborate more on the concept and the broader themes of the conference. Again, thanks to all of our conference participants who took the time to write and present their papers or participate in round table panels, and to the audience from all around the globe who have joined us online. So thank you.
Greetings from Sharjah. Thank you, Salah. It is indeed an extraordinary privilege to be one of the organizers for the conference, Ethiopia, Modern Nation, Ancient Roots. I would like to deeply thank the Africa Institute in Sharjah, its president, Shikahur Al-Qasimi, and its director, Professor Salah Hassan, for initiating the conversation to conduct the conference. Hur and Salah visited us in Addis in May 2019, and we have discussed several collaborative initiatives between the Africa Institute and Addis Ababa University, and as mentioned, the efforts that are currently suspended because of COVID-19, but will hopefully reemerge in the post-COVID-19 period. Of course, Professor Salah Hassan's passionate interest in the studies of the Horn of Africa, and particularly in the studies of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan, had always been there ever since I knew him. And this conference primarily materialized because of that interest, which goes, he goes as far as wishing to unite the three nations. So a great imagination that we may not see in our lifetime, but nonetheless in the next generation maybe. So having said that, this conference covers a wide range of an interdisciplinary project that attempts to understand the political, cultural, and social complexities of Africa's oldest independent nation state. Indeed, as our conference booklet states, the studies of Ethiopia has largely been governed by a non-colonial thesis, which in Ethiopia, which was never colonized, is in rather than of Africa. So having been the director of one of the biggest archives in the country, which is the Institute of Ethiopian Studies, I have intimately experienced and witnessed the imaginary of the non-colonial thesis, not only in the archive itself, but with the sense of exceptionalism that came with this imagination among scholars and colleagues who engaged the Institute's archive. So although the archive has not changed much since my tenure, I have nonetheless witnessed a shift in the last few years from conventional Ethiopian studies scholarship to a more critical body of knowledge. Indeed, veteran scholars like Baru Zewde and more extensively scholars like Fikru Nagash Gabrekidan had written about Ethiopia's ambiguous relationship to the wider Pan-African movements. But it's only of late that scholars have extensively written about this relationship or lack. So although few young scholars from both the diaspora and from within have begun to challenge the non-colonial thesis that had for long pervaded the scholarship of Ethiopian studies from their respective disciplinary projects, scholarship needs to be further strengthened. And as they are doing that, these young scholars, as they're doing that, they're realizing that embarking on a new intellectual engagement, on a new critical translation of the studies of Ethiopia is also encumbered with its own problems. So a recent exchange, for instance, between professors Edom Getachew and Eleni Santim Jelleka, two accomplished female scholars. The fact that they are both women makes me extremely proud. They're both participants in this conference, is one good example. How these two diasporic female scholars imagined Ethiopia in two different ways, in a new scholarship, both trained in prestigious Western institutions and both equipped with sophisticated intellectual savvy, but nevertheless, they disagreed on the process and methods of research and study. I found that exchange very refreshing, far from what we have been used to in Ethiopian studies. And the scholars who had briefly left the country for further study and who have come back to the country with great intellectual enthusiasm, other young scholars who have never left the country and who usually congregate at my house for heated debates on politics, culture, and history, I also find their passionate exchanges extremely refreshing and exciting. So recent debates on translation work, for instance, have galvanized this interest and query. Clearly, the non-colonial thesis of Ethiopian studies that has contributed to the tumultuous and contested political history of the 21st century of Ethiopia that we're witnessing today is being challenged by local and diaspora scholars. And no doubt, when their scholarship is widely publicized and known, I'm sure the malaise of existing Ethiopian studies scholarship will give way to a new and critical body of work, and hopefully a new political dialogue inside the country that we very much need. I say when their works are widely publicized because I'm also pointing out problems of access to these works in the country. Books are published in academic presses outside of the country, and getting these to the country has been very difficult. So having said this, I won't take too much time. I'm extremely excited on the issues that are going to be deliberated in the conference, and I'm sure it's going to be productive, engaging, and cutting edge. And I'd like to thank all the valued participants who, despite their busy schedules, readily agreed to be part of the conference. I would also like to thank the staff of the Africa Institute, and particularly Satan Al-Hassan, who organized every detail that pertained to the conference, from scheduling, contacting participants, producing the booklet, and some more. And thank you, Satan, for all your patience with us. Now I give it to Professor Dagmar to give his remark.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you watching, wherever you may be. Thank you so much for joining us in spite of these uncertain and precarious times in which we all find ourselves. I want to begin by expressing my deepest gratitude to the members of the Africa Institute, its president, Sheikh Ahur Al-Qasimi, its director, Professor Salah Hassan, its deputy director, Hajar Raka, and as El Sabit beautifully put it, its program officer, Satan Al-Hassan, with exquisite care, who put together the program, and everyone at the Institute who worked tirelessly to make this conference possible. The Africa Institute is off to an auspicious start. In its very short life, in just 2 to 3 years, it has already managed to showcase the cultural and intellectual riches of the continent, and there is no doubt that very soon it will be the premier research center on Africa in the world. Therefore, we are delighted and indeed honored that the Institute decided to commit to Ethiopia an entire season of programming, enabling us also to stage this conference and assemble such an illustrious group of scholars and artists to share their insights, their wisdom, and their provocations. So on behalf of my dearest friends, Dr. Elsabet Oldegiorgis and Dr. Surafil Wendimmu, I want to express my profound appreciation to everyone here at the Africa Institute in Sharjah. Now, in trying to say something meaningful in my very brief welcoming remarks, I couldn't help but think about the dead. That is, the recently departed. In the last decade or so, we have lost towering figures in Ethiopian arts and letters. I thought first about the late Jonas Admasu, the foremost literary critic of Amharic literature, who graced us with his razor-sharp intelligence and wit at a conference that Salah and Elsabet convened at Cornell University in 2008. The distinguished Ethiopianist, the late Richard Pankhurst, was also at that conference. I thought about the late Salomon Deresa, the incomparable essayist and poet who contributed to a special issue of Callaloo that Elsabet and I co-edited in 2010. I also thought about Abata Mokrea and Getachew Dabalke, gone in the last 2 to 3 years, two figures without whom modern Ethiopian theater would make little sense. And we can add to that name, to that list, the great playwrights Ege Gabramedin, of course, who passed away in 2006. Just 2 weeks ago, Mesfin Waldemariam, one of the foremost public intellectuals of his generation, passed away. And inevitably, I thought about my own late father, Wubshet Work Alamau, Nabsuni Maro, mercy on his soul, who died in March and whose advertisements left an indelible mark on Ethiopian popular culture. And many, many more who died recently, who shaped and transformed modern Ethiopia, and whose absence now not only marks tremendous loss, but also underscores a major generational shift underway in Ethiopian cultural life and, by extension, Ethiopian studies. It seems to me this question of generations is a crucial one for Ethiopianists to contend with today. The term generation being, of course, one of the principal units of periodization, be it literary periodization, historical periodization, political periodization, even how we individually identify ourselves as part of a larger collective. For instance, Yedargilajne, meaning I'm the child of the Derg, that common moniker my generation uses to collectively categorize ourselves. The field of Ethiopian studies has to take a careful inventory of how major generational shifts, wittingly and unwittingly, are shaping our thinking and indeed how we practice Ethiopian studies today. We seem to be at a new threshold in the field, where scholars well equipped with knowledge of Ethiopian languages and archives, and also well versed with the latest critical theories of the Western Academy, are contesting the very foundation of Ethiopian studies. What will fully blossom as the new Ethiopian studies is to be seen, but it's something we all have to work hard to nourish and to cultivate so it doesn't wither by acts of fiat, since Ethiopian political power is always trespassing on the Ethiopian Academy, or wither by mediocrity, since rigorous scholarship requires adequate material, educational, and cultural resources, or wither by moral cowardice, since it's hard to challenge the assumptions of any society, let alone Ethiopian society, governed often by fear and others' estimation, or as in its early development, that the field is not constricted by Western patronage and paternalism. In short, we all have to ensure that the new life that's being injected into the field is not snuffed out, but instead can develop fully and assert itself boldly. Towards that endeavor, then, this conference, Ethiopia, Modern Nation, Ancient Roots, is one modest effort. We hope you can glean from the range of panels and presenters. We have sought to put together a conference that reflects the riches of Ethiopian arts and letters, indeed a conference that not only animates Ethiopia's unique history and culture, but also refracts the world at large. Again, thank you to all the presenters who, against different pressures of these times, agreed to join us. We look forward to being enlightened and educated, questioned and challenged over the course of the coming week. Thank you. Shukran. Amasekanalo.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the co-organizers at the Institute of the Africa Institute Sharjah and the Institute of Ethiopian Studies at Addis Ababa University, my colleagues and everyone. An Ethiopian female migrant worker imprisoned at Al Deir Detention Center in Saudi Arabia recently said, quote, "He was sleeping on the ground. He was weak. He urinated while sleeping. We shouted and guards came in to take him. 4 days later, I saw this 15-year-old boy lying on the ground outside. He was dead. I saw another body next to him," end quote. History has continued to be catastrophic. The debris is piling up in front of our eyes, hurling at our feet. From the killings in different parts of Ethiopia, to deaths of hundreds of migrants in the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and Mediterranean Sea, from atrocities endured in prisons, domestic spaces, and industrial parks, to ghettos, high-rising buildings, and psychiatric hospitals. From Africa to Europe, North America, and Asia, Black bodies have continued to suffer from both epistemic and embodied incarcerations. As race, gendered, and sexed global capital is, the global, regional, local, hierarchical relations hit women, poor men, sexual minorities, caste groups, local workers, farmers, and pastoralists very hard. To make Black lives more precarious, neoliberal forces use Black bodies as scapegoats. Yet global capitalism thrives, denying its inherent crisis and cannibalizing the human suffering, as, for instance, evidenced in COVID-19 public health catastrophe. How can we then account for and see the wreckage piling up in the here and now, amid proliferation of empty nationalisms, rise of white supremacy, and intensification of necroeconomy that is driven by, quote, the logic of capital, which posits death as central activity of value creation, unquote, as Fatmir Hazkaj has it. What is equally important to note is the renunciation of any utopia other than neoliberal desires, or what I call necroepistemology. As global Black Lives Matter movements give us hope, Ethiopia, Modern Nation, Ancient Roots, our conference will play a generative role in giving a space for intellectual conversation and artistic engagement that question the status quo and co-create options. I hope the space offers an ample opportunity to unsettle local and global parochialisms and critically engage with issues of global humanities, in the present without losing sight of particular historical material relationships. Following Du Boisian perspective, Ethiopia modern nation ancient roots will serve as a mode of thinking to take Ethiopia as a crossroad that accounts for its people's historical material relations with the rest of Africa, the Black diaspora, the Middle East, and Asia, including their vested relation with the West. Thank you so very much, and I wish all the participants of this conference, film screenings,